former head of the Green Party in England, in the UK, on with us. He's also a championship goalie, BBC presenter. He's a best-selling author, lecturer, David-Icke, for this next 5 minutes and then the full next hour. And he's going to be in South Africa coming up in about 5 days, speaking down there. But David, I want to get into the poisoning of the food and water supply, these new viruses that they say will cure stress, that will reprogram the brain so you can't get upset or resist. But you weren't listening earlier, but I want to throw this out at you. From your research, this guy called in, and I shouldn't have gotten mad at him. I apologize for calling him a punk, but he should apologize for claiming he thinks I'm funded by the oil companies when I've not been given 1 cent by oil companies, to point out that the oil companies, the big ones, are promoting the global carbon tax to openly fund their new private world government. From your research, what is the carbon tax about? And, I mean, is it not all over the news that the oil companies are funding the carbon tax?
The thing is, Alex, that what people need to appreciate is that you see oil companies, you see pharmaceutical companies, you see governments, you see the medical world, and all these different elements of society, the military. But these are different masks on the same face. If you see them as individual, you say, why would the oil companies want a carbon tax and less oil being sold? And oh no, they'd never do that. Well, that's not the situation. They are just an agent of this central global manipulating core.
And you've broken that down before, showing how all the major BP, Dutch Rollstel, Exxon Mobil people are also the heads of the Trilateral Commission, Bilderberg Group, Club of Rome, and it's all interwoven. It's just a few hundred people.
Exactly. This is what I say to these people who go on marches about globalization and then would dismiss the kind of things that appear on your show and in my books and talks and stuff as, oh no, that's extreme, that's not going on. What they're saying is the transnational corporations, like the oil companies and the other transnational corporations, they're behind globalization, centralization of global power because of greed. No. BP, the oil companies, and all these other transnationals are not the engine room of globalization. They are the vehicles for it. And so what may appear to be not good for the oil companies in terms of carbon taxes and less use of oil and all this stuff is actually good for the agenda, which the oil companies are one strand within. And once you start to understand that, what appear to be contradictions become perfectly understandable and perfectly logical.
And we have the heads of all these major oil companies and the head of NASA and the head of the UN saying they want a post-industrial world to cut off our energy, to carry out forced population reduction. The first they industrialize us, they get us dependent, then they start cutting it off.
Yeah, and what they want is basically a global fiefdom where people will just be drugged up zombies who are just able to function enough to serve as slaves and nothing more. And we're at a point of epoch change here, Alex. It's very, very important. Maybe we could get into this after the news and after the break, because all this stuff you're talking about with the brain-eating nanotechnology and viruses and what's in food and water is specifically designed to destabilize the body computer system, the receiver-transmitter system of the human body, so that it is locked into an area of information decoding, which is a tiny, tiny fraction of the information that is available for us to decode. It's like the wireless internet. You know, if you are in some countries, you can get all over the internet. But if you're in China, it's firewalled off, so you can only get to a fraction of the information.
And the brain is an electrochemical computer, and they now admit they want to sterilize us with vaccines, and they want to brain damage us. Stay there. Well, they now admit bisphenol A is making girls as young as 3 go into puberty. Hundreds of thousands at age 7. It's happening in Europe, England, the United States. It's feminizing boys, and now I have Times of London, The Mail, Wired Magazine. Oh, they're going to inject the troops with DNA boosters that block off areas of their brains. Oh, we're going to give the public an anti-stress vaccine so you can't get upset. It's a herpes virus carrying a hormone that then attacks the receptor site so you can never feel those emotions. And they say, because we want to calm you down. And they now admit that that's what the fluoride is about. They're now proposing suddenly, in literally hundreds of newspapers in the last 3 weeks, we've covered it here, lithium needs to be put in the water to calm everyone, a toxic metal antipsychotic. Everything David Icke has talked about, we know this has already been going on from all the studies. Now they're coming out with it. David, are they doing this because they're getting desperate and we've been exposing them, and now they want to take the power of exposure away and just spin it?
Well, I think that's part of it. I mean, there's more and more holes that are being sprung in the dike every day of their suppression of understanding and knowledge of what's actually going on. But if you go back many decades, Alex, to 1932, when a book was published by a guy called Aldous Huxley called Brave New World, people have said to me over the years, what's the plan? And I've said, well, just read 2 books to get the feel for it. One, Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. 2, George Orwell's 1984. Now, interestingly, Aldous Huxley was a teacher at Eton College, this elite college that the Royals go to near Windsor Castle. And one of his pupils was a guy called Eric Blair, who later wrote under the name of George Orwell. And they were connected, because you'll know this well, and many other people, to the Fabian-Society. And because the Fabian-Society, which was the creator of the British Labour Party, of Tony Blair and all the rest of it, because they are a major strand in the web, if you are an inner circle member of that, you have access to the projected agenda for the world going forward a long time. And this allows you to write prophetic novels, apparently novels, from actual understanding of what the game is. And then when we get to where we are now, we look back and we go, that Brave New World in that 1984, my God, they were so accurate. How did they do that? Because they had access to this information. And
Let me back you up. Let me back you up. I always have to interrupt David because I want to back him up because he just states the facts. I want to give you the proof. David, there is a 1962 hour-long speech he gave at Berkeley. Just Google Aldous Huxley Berkeley speech. You'll hear the audio. And he said in the speech that his pupil was George Orwell. He said that his brother was the head of the UN eugenics program, Julian Huxley. And he said, my pupil is wrong. It will only be 20 or 30%. 1984. The rest is making you love your servitude with chemicals. This is what we plan with eugenics, and I'm telling you now because you're too weak to even resist us. And then he died 2 months later. He knew he was dying, so he went ahead and came out and said, I wrote this in 32. He also wrote that in Brave New World Revisited, written in the 50s. He said, this is our actual plan. This is nonfiction. Sorry, David, go ahead.
Well, that's absolutely right. And what he's talking about and writing about since the 1930s is exactly what's happening today, because he knew it was coming. He had access to the projected agenda, and that is to control people through drugs. And the reason that some of these so-called prophetic writers can write novels, futuristic novels, including technology and drug techniques that weren't even thought about at the time they wrote them, is because they have access to the agenda. And this takes us somewhere else. In Brave New World, the theme is that parents no longer bring up children or even give birth to them. They're brought up in state hatcheries, and it's all laboratory birth, basically creating clones for the masses who have no ability to think with any level of intelligence.
David, stay there. Got to interrupt you. Long segment coming up.
Okay.
And now the state calls the family a disease. They admit the plan is to end the family. They're going to have year-round schooling. Then your kids will stay there till nighttime. We'll be right back. Well, the one, the only, David Icke is our guest for the balance of the hour. If you just joined us, we were talking about Aldous Huxley, who in 32 wrote Brave New World, about a caste system with the scientific, technocratic elite, right down to suboid, 3-foot-tall dwarf creatures that serve the elite. Their main focus was to make their slave class go into puberty at around age 7, but then to also be quasi-sterile. But they wanted them to go into puberty so they'd be developed as work slaves by that point so they couldn't challenge them. Now the age of puberty is moving to 7 in girls. The bisphenol A has done well. And he bragged. He said, look, Artie in England, before he died, he said, we've got remote control at the mental institutions with brain implants. He said, my brother at the UN is developing this. He said, this is the plan. And so when you read that science fiction book, it's not science fiction. And again, he wrote a book decades later called Brave New World Revisited, nonfiction, where he just laughs at you and points out that most of us will be killed. David Icke, you were getting into the hatcheries, how they take the babies at birth, how they genetically engineer them in laboratories. That's their plan. And now they're moving, and I got Pentagon declassified documents, to just fly over us and spray the viruses on us. We get a headache, we get sick, and then it destroys our receptors that allow us to think or become angry. And so that's clearly where they're going, not just lacing the vaccines with this. Please continue.
Yeah, and the other aspect of this, I mean, you mentioned a few minutes ago, is this multi-level attack on the family unit. And I've got really seriously into one area of this over the last 6 months, which is the state stealing children from loving parents. It is an absolute epidemic in Britain. I was speaking at Trafalgar Square on Saturday at a rally against child abuse in which this stealing children by the state was a fundamental part of it. I've been getting involved in one or two individual cases and trying to give my support to mothers who've had. I'll give you one example. A young daughter, she's now 10. Says the father has been abusing her for years. The mother takes the daughter to social services and the police and says, this is what she's saying, and I want unsupervised visits to the father stopped until we've sorted this out. They refuse to investigate, and when she then starts action against the police and the social services for not investigating, they then say to her, we think you're a split personality, and away goes the child, and they give the child to the relative of the father.
But David, specifically, I've had members of British Parliament on, and it's even in your mainstream news, in the London Telegraph, that there are quotas on children before they're even born for the adoption racket.
That's right, and financial incentives around the world to meet these targets, which means if you can't find enough genuinely abused children by their parents, then you have to find those that are not. But of course, it's not only that, Alex, as we know. I mean, a lot of these kids are I mean, if you're a satanic pedophile ring, and those two usually connect, in fact, almost always connect at some point, then you need a supply of children, a constant supply of children. Of course, the social services can do that. In fact, they can target children. I know this is going on, Alex, where someone will target someone, a child. They'll see a child in the community, and they'll say, I want that child. And then someone from the ring in social services then finds a reason why the child shouldn't be with the parents, some spurious reason. We've had a situation here. This is one of endless ones where this woman and her husband, she had fertility treatment, £38,000 worth, gave birth to twins. A social worker came round when they came out of hospital. She made a joke, hey, having giving birth has ruined my figure. And they took her child away. And when she got angry, as you would, they said, the mother's also got anger problems and therefore a danger to the child. And this is going on epidemic-wise. And in the cases that I've been involved in, and I'm involved in, I've seen blatant lies where the social services have put into reports the mother has faked medical evidence of abuse on the child, and I've seen the doctor's report where it came from. It wasn't faked at all. So it's all lies. And what they've done, this is another element of it, and not just in social services, but very, very significantly so, because of the children being taken, but in government in general. They are using job application techniques to elicit narcissistic personalities who have no empathy, who have no compassion, who have no ability to empathize with the agony of loving parents having their children taken away, and they're getting the jobs in social services, which is why all these parents say it's like talking to a computer. These people have no soul.
But David, going back, they're constantly catching the heads of social services worldwide running pedophile rings. I mean, that's even CNN. But expanding on that, this is part of a larger agenda. As you know, when they set up eugenics 150 years ago, now 160 years ago in England, by the turn of the century, 1900, they created racial hygiene health departments in Germany, England, the U.S., and Canada that openly, so the health department itself is to carry out eugenics. And that's why they now admit blood is taken secretly at birth from all babies in the West and put in a Pentagon database.